Hi there, my name is Teni Brant, and welcome to Speak Dicely, the podcast where I get together with other tabletop enthusiasts and we speak dicely together. A campaign in Dungeons & Dragons is a series of connected adventures typically centered around a constant group of characters. A group can play sessions of a single campaign over the course of months or even years. But to invest in a story for so long, you want to ensure that the setting you're playing in and the character that you're playing as are stories that you want to explore. Today's podcast is the first of two parts. Today we'll talk about campaign setting, and next week we'll be talking about building a character. And today is the first time that I have 4 guests at the same time. So joining me for this 2-part podcast are Dallis Mackenzie, Logan Cracknell, Matt Costin, and Michael Piscitelli. Hey guys!
Hello.
Woo!
How's it going?
Good God!
Turning Dallas's volume down.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got so excited. And kick from the server.
We have 3 guests here today. Start over.
You do the whole thing again?
Dallas should at least stick around and be the enthusiastic audience with her applause.
I thought I at least had that applause job.
But if all the audience members went woo at the same time, that's what just happened.
And now Dicely is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
And oh God, are they alive?
It's just me.
Oh, well, everybody here today is a returning guest, so we don't really have to explore your guys' backstories, as it were, into tabletop. But happy to have you back.
Later on, we'll explore backstories with characters as opposed to people.
That's right. And we do actually have a bit of a time crunch today, so this episode might be a bit shorter than the past ones have been. Hilariously enough, we did this in place of the campaign we were supposed to be playing because one of our players couldn't make it.
But now they can.
So now I got to record this super fast and get onto D&D.
That's right. So we're recording this for you guys to be excited to go play D&D for real.
This is a hype-up session.
That's right. A little bit of theory, a little bit of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Also, our big campaign that we got going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody here is involved.
Yep.
And our other friend, Adrian, who has yet to come on the podcast, but I'm sure you'll hear from him soon.
What a shame.
I feel like he's been mentioned in most podcasts.
He's got to be the most entertaining person you could possibly bring on the podcast.
He's never going to be on, but we will just talk about him so much that everyone believes they know Adrian.
Well, we'll just keep hyping him up and you'll never see him.
I think the better option is we just tell all his stories so that when you bring him on, he has nothing new to say.
He just sits silently the entire time. I don't think Adrian is capable of sitting silently now that I think about it.
Yeah, he'll come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
He's a madman. But
anyway,
today
on to the podcast.
That's right. Today we're talking about kind of prepping a campaign, which is a series of connected adventures that, and these campaigns can go on for a very long time if players and DMs are committed to it. And like we were just saying, we've been playing in one campaign in the last session. Wow, I'm getting real into this theme. In the last episode, we were talking about how we played in Logan's pirate campaign for a couple of years, but now we've moved on to another time within that same setting. So in order to kind of get us prepped for this campaign, we had to go through something. Well, at least we recognize the practice of doing something called a session 0. So would somebody care to explain what a session 0 is?
Oh, yeah. A session 0 is where I told all of these people all the ways I was going to kill them.
All right, you guys.
I mean, you're not wrong.
We've been playing D&D too long.
It's like, oh, let's make this right. But a session 0 is where everyone gets together to discuss expectations at the table, the general themes that either the players or DMs or all of them are wanting to delve into with the story, figuring out how your character fits into this, or even ideas. Some tables, people really are about like, oh, I don't want to double up with people, so it's a good time for you to figure out what your friends are wanting to play, maybe what you're wanting to play, and discuss that, and also how that character can fit into the worlds and the ideas that the GM is bringing to the table.
Yeah, and that's also a good time to like also start doing other things like rolling up stats and figuring out what kind of like things you are going to end up starting out with. Because when you're making a character, you still have like all the usual, I'm going to starting equipment and all that stuff. But like sometimes, for example, with this campaign, my character ended up starting out with less stuff because he was a criminal. So he had some of his starting equipment taken away.
Right. And that was something we discussed in the session 0.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there were certain story elements based on your choices that kind of had default repercussions within the world lore that Logan had set up.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also a good time for the GM to express any home rules that they're running to incorporate into it, or variants that exist in things like the DMG and Xanathar's Guide, as a lot of players don't necessarily expect that to be the norm. Bringing that up means that if a player isn't on board with it and is like, ooh, this doesn't sound like a game I want to play, you can bring it back in before you get 5 sessions in and it's like, oh, nobody liked this idea.
And for the listeners, the DMG stands for Dungeon Master's Guide, which is one of the core books. And Logan is referring to GM, which is a more generic term for a Dungeon Master, meaning Game Master, that is more is less specific to Dungeons and Dragons.
Plus, Dungeon Master could even refer to like not necessarily tabletop role playing.
Yeah, I knew this was going to happen at some point.
That's yeah. I'm a GM for these guys. I'm a DM for some other folks.
God.
If you'd like to DM the DM, you can find that in the description.
I like that with this naming convention, we got the DM for Dungeon Master for Dungeons and Dragons. I'm running the Pokemon version of that. Does that make me a Pokemon Master?
Oh
my
God.
We'll refer to you as the PM from now on.
100% you are a Pokemon Master.
The PM.
I am the PM.
So
that's a Canadian joke.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, Americans. You're too busy with your president. But for all of us as players, how useful do you find the Session 0 is?
Incredibly.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Yes.
Yeah. I've done it without it, and I would never go back to doing it without it.
Yeah,
like go ahead, Matt.
All right. I find with Session 0, like some of the biggest things are knowing, as a player for Session 0, it's great knowing kind of the boundaries on where you can make a character. Like, we were doing a pirate campaign. Probably shouldn't build a guy whose whole thing is he lives in a desert. Might not be the best thing to build for this guy. Like, it's just really good to get your idea of the world you're going to play in and kind of get ideas going for that. And yeah, as Logan was saying, as the DM, doing one of these Session 0s really helps you get everyone on the same page and know, like, you can kind of spitball your ideas for the story, and if people hate it, you can adjust it then before you get started on like writing it, honestly. It also helps you to incorporate the player characters into the story, because you basically just take a session where you all talk about what you might want for characters. You're like, oh, he wants to do that, I can fit that into the story. Or Dallis wants to be a pirate captain, we can make sure they get a ship, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's good as a player as well to get an idea of what, like you were saying, like what other people are playing, and you can start to kind of play off of that as well. If you're like, oh, you're from this town, well, I could say that I'm also from that town. Maybe we would know each other. You can kind of establish backstory with like your characters as well at that point, or at least start forming those ideas before you like jump straight into the game.
Yeah, because I think, what is it? We had one for the game Adrian's running. There was no Session 0, nothing like that. We didn't really talk too much about our characters, I don't think. Because the first session showed up and Denny and Dallis had built the exact same character build. Yeah, they were both wizards, really? Both the same kind of wizard with the exact same kind of spells.
No.
Now, we're not both the same kind.
Oh, okay.
I can't tell you what kind of wizard I am, to be honest.
Dallis just wrote wizard in all caps, like big barbarian style letters.
That's probably what I did. We were like 12 episodes in or 12 sessions in before I was like, how many spells am I supposed to have as a wizard? Can someone help
Well,
me?
it's like the realization that you're like, I can cast this spell, and it's like, I can cast that too, and then you realize you've prepared the same, almost an identical spell list to each other.
But going into this session 0, I think this is also if you have 2 wizards and stuff, or if everyone wants to be a wizard, that gives the DM like, cool, everyone wants to play a wizard. You either have the choice there to be like, cool, this isn't the game I want to DM, pass it on to someone else or figure something out, or it's, what is the adventure that 4 wizards would go on? They're probably not starting a night school and training in the army. They're probably trying to find ancient lore and stuff, and that's a whole area of a game that is cool to explore. That having the idea beforehand, oh, everyone wants to play a wizard, you get that. But if you come to that first session being like, I figured this out for a perfectly balanced party, and everyone's like, I'm a wizard, it's like, oh boy, everything's going to kill you in one shot.
Yeah, the session 0 presents a good opportunity for, if you want to set up kind of a gimmick campaign like that where everybody's the same class, or I feel like the same class tends to be one of the easier gimmicks to pull off, or the same race, for example, an entire goblin crew. That also tends to be a pretty popular one that I've seen people do.
The entire Kenku squad.
Oh, there you go.
A nightmare of a game.
Wow.
Oh God.
What a game.
For the listeners, the Kenku is a bird-like creature that can't talk but can imitate noises. So you're going to have a table full of people just going, nyang, nyang. Just madness.
Yeah, it can also mimic speech, so it can say words it's heard before.
Oh
so
my God.
all it's going to do is they're going to be repeating each other forever. Because normally it's the Kenku just repeats words that the other players have said, but if everyone's a Kenku, it's the minute they run into an NPC, that's all they'll say for the rest of the day.
I think
it just turns into a big feedback loop. Oh God.
I think what I would require from that,
this is a good one shot,
player group would be for everyone to have a soundboard and to just program sounds as the campaign went on.
Yeah.
Oh.
That would be amazing.
Oh my God.
That would be elaborate.
I want this so badly. Everyone buy a soundboard.
And now I'm just thinking of the ideas. It's like everyone records the DM throughout the session, and then they cut out the character's speech that the DM.
Man.
There was one time,
and this is why you have a session 0.
Yeah, there was one time actually we did a session 0, and I was trying to come up with a character background. I think it was for a game Denny was running or a part of, but there was a list of like extra backgrounds Denny had brought in, just like this huge document of them. And I found one I was going to do like a savage character who like wasn't very socialized. But one of the flaws, which I thought was a lot of fun, was you only know 25 words that you can speak. Write this list out before the game starts. And like, that's hilarious. And like, since we did the session 0, decent amount of time before the game started, I tried it, realized this is a terrible idea. I'm going to hate playing this, and scrapped the whole backstory.
That's great. That's a great reason to have a session 0 as well.
Yeah, once I started writing that list of 25 words, I'm like, I've got nothing. I can't say anything.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than finding out that you've made a character and you hate it with a fiery passion. I had that happen to me when I joined another another group. They were like a very well established like adventuring party that had like, I think they were about level 7 at the time, and I made a druid, and like 3 sessions in, I realized that I couldn't stand this character, and I did everything in my. There was one point when we actually did the Tomb of Horrors, and I tried everything I could to kill this character off, and for some freaking reason, this is the only character I wasn't able to kill off. I've killed off so many characters, and this one refused to die. He's still alive, technically.
The curse of Michael.
Yeah.
You only die when you don't want to.
Yeah, every time he wants to die, my campaign, that one, he doesn't get it. But
we talked about that last week.
I think, with that and with the prep, like if, both on the players and GM's end, there's only so much prep you can do beforehand. And if you realize something isn't working or don't like it, throw it away, change it. Like, adventurers can retire.
Yeah.
If you don't like a character that you've spent the session 0, you figured things out, you're like, oh, this is going to be perfect. And then you're like 3 sessions in, you're like, oh, I hate this. I've done something in this character that I just don't like, and I want them to leave. Talk to the DM and, just be like, hey, I don't like this character. Figure a way to get rid of them and bring someone new in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And don't feel like you're stuck with whatever you guys come up with in session 0. As the GM, you could build your whole world, everyone's on the same page, and as the story starts progressing, things get way off track from what you guys came up with. It's fine to switch it up. Don't feel like you have to steer everyone back to session 0, or session 0's story, essentially.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because with the pirate campaign, that was originally supposed to be a series of one-offs, but then it became a whole story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, campaigns evolve, absolutely. It's like the beauty of D&D is that nothing is set in stone. It's always changing and always evolving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think
I think the session 0 does really help to start you off on the right foot.
Yeah, it gives everybody kind of the pointed direction of where you intend for this to go. But and I think Logan kind of picked up on this with that pirate campaign, as players kind of played, I think subconsciously we were all doing things that felt very story driven. So Logan's like, all right, I'll make this a story driven game then.
Yeah, there was
all right, fine.
It was like the halfway point, I think, in the entire thing, where I was like, okay, there's something is brewing here. It's not just because originally it was just get treasure, made up some treasures in the world. There wasn't really going to be a big those 4 items you had to find. They weren't supposed to be anything really spectacular. They were just going to be cool treasure that you'd get. And then it was like, no, a story's developing. Everyone has these characters that have investment and stuff now. Then I'm like, cool, let's change what I had originally thought and make this into a thing. And it was super fun. But if I had just stayed with the original idea, it's like, nope, these are one-offs. Nothing really matters. It's meant to be drop in, drop out. Who cares? Then it's like, that one of the most memorable campaigns I've run wouldn't exist if I had been, stuck in the way I had described things at the beginning.
So
I'm still kind of sad that...
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm still kind of sad that the one thing I asked for, a ghost pirate ship, I didn't end up being able to be a part of because I was busy that week.
You were there for half of it.
Yeah, we got there, but then I wasn't there for anything else because I had something going on.
Nothing good happened on that ghost pirate ship.
Yeah, I was going to say, I aged 20 years on that ship. That was not a good time.
Yeah. If you ever find a luxury liner in the middle of the ocean, don't go on it. It's a mimic.
Just leave.
Full of ghosts. It's going to be a bad time.
Boat. Yeah, it was a bad time.
Oh, madness. So what are some ways to alter the tone of a campaign? And I don't think this has to be specific to DMs or no. What am I saying? It doesn't have to be a question specific to DMs. Like what are some story elements that you guys think could alter the tone and themes of a campaign?
I would say tragic backstory, except for almost everyone has that. So I think having your character have a loving, happy family will alter the tone of your game.
I think the session 0 really just helps everyone get on the same idea of what tone they want out of a game. Do you guys want to do a really silly comedy kind of game? Do you want to do something more serious in tone? Kind of helps everyone get a grip on what they want for that and figure out how they're going to play that off each other. So you don't have 3 people are like, oh, I've got a sad character in this desolate world we've built. And then one person's like, my guy sells hamburgers for... He's a traveling hamburger salesman.
Matt, you're describing every campaign we've ever done.
I know. I was going to say, our group's a bad example for that.
Let's say that's Adrian every time.
Adrian is always the hamburger man.
In ways of altering tone, it's, the typical, setting D&D takes place in. And a lot of fantasy-based tabletop games is, big magic. You are the heroes. You will become the knights in shining armor that so much of media has portrayed in fantasy stories. You will be Frodo and Aragorn in the Fellowship taking the ring to Mordor. And it's like simple things as, changing the tone. A game that Denny and I were players in, we, in the first session, as I think it was the session 0 that we did for that, I had come in being like, oh, I'm going to be evil, but I'm expecting them to all be good. And my character will, change probably from getting to know them. But then when I said I would be evil, everyone else was like, what if we're all evil? That totally just changed, one, how I was going to play my character. Because suddenly they weren't going to have this become good arc. It was probably going to be, they're going to do a bunch of evil things, but also totally different than any other D&D game I've played. And then things like, low magic is one that I find very fascinating and quite enjoy, is this takeaway D&D's idea of like, magic is this thing that there's wizards and warlocks flinging spells and stuff. And it's like, maybe there's a small group of people in the world that have magic, or maybe magic is more like what you think of with alchemy.
Illegal.
Or in my campaign, it's illegal. It still fully exists, but there's a limit to like how it can be used. But even I was thinking in ways that magic can be practically explained. Fireball isn't necessarily a magic spell. It's an alchemist has shoved oil and a flaming rag in a flask, and they just throw a Molotov cocktail. But that changes the themes of it, because now anyone could really have a fireball in their pocket.
Well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, in that world, like, yeah, you said that world, like, spellcaster classes aren't really a thing. Anyone could be a spellcaster.
Because like, and it's interesting kind of approaching that from like a historical perspective, because it's just like, if you go back into human history, it's like who were considered wizards and witches. It was the people who were intelligent, the people who were crafty and that understood how chemistry worked, how the world worked. And so you could make magic in your system function like that. It's just you're playing a character who has a better understanding of the world than everybody else. Another way you can kind of set the tone of the campaign is like determining during the session 0 like what the starting level every character's starting at. Because if you're starting at level 1, everyone's like, we're just starting to become adventurers. But if you go at a higher level, then everyone kind of has established history. So you kind of the characters would have to figure that out. And then, of course, there's playstyle. Like we've had pirates. You could have like a band of rogues who are just about doing heists. Yeah, there's all kinds of elements you can do to change the tone.
Going off of that, you could even kind of going back to the podcast about relationships, you could even talk about how the people know each other. For example, a campaign I'm about to start, all of us decided that we were going to be all half brothers who all have the same father, but we're also half something. So, for example, my character is a half orc. Our friend Nick, he's playing half elf, and our other friend Jason, he's playing a human. But the joke is he's half human, half human. So you meet this half orc, this half elf, and this
fair, I guess,
half human. But like we're all half brothers, and we find part of the session 0, because we're going to be starting at like level 5, was us talking about how did we meet, how did we get to where we are now, how did we establish our medical practice in this mega city, and like that kind of gave us a little bit of an idea of that it's probably going to be a fairly silly campaign, also a campaign that's legitimizing the practice of necromancy.
Yeah.
In the world. So like, who knows where this campaign's going to end up going? I certainly don't.
Yeah, I think I've seen DMs do like really cool stuff in session 0s to help establish relationships. I think, Logan, it was you one time where we all wrote like a story, and then we passed our stories to the person on the right, and that person had to like write themselves into our story. So we like wrote a story about our character, and then the person on the right just had to kind of figure out how their character might have fit into this story in some way, or has heard this story from someone else. And so I've seen DMs do really interesting things in a session 0 to like force that kind of relationship building.
Yeah, I stole that from a system called Fate. And honestly, with campaign prep, anyone who's wanting to start one, I think even if, D&D is the system you want to use, I think there are plenty of lovely things you can steal from other systems.
Yep.
As like the beauty of tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, I've done one like that too, where it was also kind of a riff on the fate system, where each person wrote something about their character just to give a very brief description of them, and then to make sure everyone had some connection with each other, it was like you'd go to another character and be like, or another player be like, hey, so this is Matt's character. What's one time he really helped you out? And like that kind of thing, and go to a different character and be like, Matt knows a secret about you. What is it? Something no one else at the table will know. So I have like one thing where I helped a guy so he trusts me, and one where someone knows I know someone's secret, and everyone has some kind of connection like that. So that you have some kind of bond to everyone at the table, but it's not something everyone knows or everyone's experienced together. So it's kind of cool. It can get a little confusing with bigger groups, but it was good for a small 3-person team.
Yeah.
Oh, was that us?
No, because ours was just Matt made it for a campaign that myself, Dallis, and Michael were in. Matt was just like, you're all friends.
Yeah.
Like, you have to like each other. You work together. You know each other. Which did change the dynamic because, I think in that one, we all wanted to work together. In the campaign I'm running right now, Dallas's character seems to hate everyone else.
Everyone. I think I have to come in and reinvent this
and
character.
Matt's character really seems to hate Michael's.
Oh, I hate Michael.
Yeah.
The first thing Michael did in the game was steal from my friend and then commit essentially treason around me constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then ask why I have a problem with him. Especially when he told me he was stealing from my friend because he wants to talk to people with magic. I'm like, that's the worst excuse to save yourself.
I don't think you know how I feel about magic.
But yeah, both of those are dynamics that I feel change the campaign, but don't have to be facilitated by the GM. Whereas like, high and low magic, starting level, that's always going to be facilitated by kind of the DM, the GM. The relationships between the players, while Matt in his said that the three of us had to be friends, the three of us could have just decided to be friends. In mine, I didn't say that no one had to know each other, but it ended up where a lot of people didn't know each other. And so there's these like issues of trust between the players, which greatly changes the dynamic and the play style of one party to the other.
Even in that case, you did kind of influence some relationships, though, because I think you put Michael and I on that boat together. So there were still things that we did pre-campaign to establish some relationship between the characters.
Yeah, you guys kind of had the Skyrim start. Yeah. Oh, you're awake.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, because I stole mine from a thing that Denny's done where it's the idea is you must know someone at the table. You don't have to know everyone, but I was like, you all must know someone.
I somehow skipped that part.
No, so you do. Yes, Denny did skip it. Matt, you did not. Christy just has never been at a session.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Yes. Matt's friend does not exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I compensated for it by just being an extremely friendly character, so I think that's a good workaround.
And that's another thing that can end up happening in Session 0 is that sometimes players just aren't able to make it to campaigns. So things start getting planned, and then, looks like this person's not going to be involved. We're going to have to, we'll do it live.
Yep. The show must go on. I'm going to begin moving this a little bit along a bit more quickly. So for those who have created worlds, and for those of us who haven't DM'd, what is your process for preparing your game world or your story for your character?
I think personally, I always end up starting with what's the kind of character I want to make. So I'll think about like what the class is, and then I'll think, okay, what do I want to do?
I'm going to stop you there because we'll get to more of that specifically on the next podcast. I'm talking more like story, not building a character.
Yeah, like when you ran your campaign, Michael, what did you do for? What was your process of coming up with the world?
So hilariously, it all started because I was really, really into the idea of having there be a witch on a broom that was like the main antagonist of the whole thing. and I wanted the party to eventually have this magical flying broomstick, which I later found out there was an actual like broom of flying item, but I didn't know that at the time because this was actually back when we were still first starting. But it could be as simple as I want people to have a cool magic flying broom, and then build a whole world off of that. Which actually ended up I had all this lore and things involved because with that campaign there was these 3 regions. All controlled by these 3 witches, almost like a Wizard of Oz sort of scenario. But I tried to make it so that the witches were a little bit more ambiguous as to whether they were good or evil. So I started everyone off in one section of the world with this one witch who really showed her hand very much. So
Yeah, I had a feeling this might happen.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Michael.
I was wondering if it was me or Michael.
No, it's Michael's connection.
Yeah, unfortunately, Michael doesn't have the greatest connections.
I ended up actually taking a lot of stuff from a whole bunch of different pop culture places. And can you hear that?
Oh my god!
The beauty is we heard nothing for so long.
We do it live.
Yep.
It's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Long story short, I ended up starting with the whole concept of flying magic broom is fun. And then I thought, okay, witches are a thing.
Yeah.
There we go again.
Yeah.
we got the important part. Flying magic broom and witches are a thing.
Got it. Done.
Yeah.
Well, I went, okay, how do these
flying magic
there's these other
witches.
places they're also run by witches. What kind of environment? And then I build off of that.
Yes.
All right.
Well, in any case, let's have someone else talk because I clearly am not able to.
Yeah. So it's really funny because today I've started writing a bunch of stuff regarding world building and campaign building specific, and I always start it from small to big. So I will start with a town. I was like, ooh, here is a town where cool things could happen. And so the campaign I have right now is like, ooh, one, I was very inspired by the Icewind Dale stuff. I started writing it before it was officially released, but I was like, ooh, I like this idea. Cold tundra kind of horror. It's like a small town in there. Let's start there. And then I was like, what's near this town? What exists around it? And I build out from there. And I very much start with I just make a world. I don't really make a story until I've fleshed out enough of the world that a player can decide, I just want to go there. And there might be something. If everyone decided at the start of the first session, it's oh, we want to all escape from this place and get to a nice warm city. I have some nice warm cities that have something there. Even if it is, and I will say this one thing is, even in a campaign, that thing might exist in multiple towns because the players won't know that. But I have enough things that it's this can exist anywhere, and then enough things that are specific to the places. But yeah, I like and it's kind of I find 2 schools on campaign building and world building are, big to small, which would be in mine if I started with the theme of the whole empire and then brought it down. Whereas I started the small, I started with just the town and then branched out from there until I got to this empire the town exists in.
Yeah, I'm the same school of thought really when it comes to building campaigns. Is I kind of start small and figure out what the scope of this campaign is going to be. How big will I make this world? How much of it will they see? What do I need to flesh out? What do I not? I've run a bunch of different stuff now, but one of them, the concept was, I built a campaign once. Campaign was a bunch of one-offs. The idea was when people couldn't get together to do the main campaign, whoever could would do this little side story thing. So the scope was you were all guards in one city. So I knew I didn't have to build a world outside the city very much. I didn't have to flesh out the politics of the nation or anything like that because people will be working in this town. So I could just come up with cool events that would happen there. I've built other ones where I'm like, I want a small nation, so I'll need to plan stuff for the different towns in that nation, and really just kind of starting off by getting a handle on how big of a world I have to build and what kind of events I need to think up.
I really wish I had done that with the one that I was trying to tell you guys about before, because theoretically I started out with the idea of a magic broom, and then I went immediately to large scale. What is this world? What are the countries? Who runs them? And I kind of regret not starting with the small scale. Okay, where do they start? First of all,
I've had ones where I started with a concept. Like I ran a small one, we never ended up finishing it, but the concept I had was like an encounter where there was this town being plagued by something that essentially would take people's minds through their dreams and just kind of collect their stories. So at night, the players would have encounters during their long rests. And that was the starting premise for this short campaign I tried to write. And then I figured out, like, why would they go there? What could be causing this? And kind of expanded out from that concept to build the short story around it we could run through.
Yeah, and I don't think there's like a wrong way of going either way. I think there's very good benefits to both. Starting big, while you have these grand ideas, like let's say in Michael's 3 nations, you start with that. All those small towns you make get influenced by the big nation they're a part of. I think there's ways of a fantasy author, Brandon Sanderson, has like laws to magic, and kind of, I think even when you look at world building, it can kind of apply the same. Whereas the more concrete the rules are in terms of the world that you've built, the more the players understand that, the more that can be direct fixes to things. So if you have a strong understanding of the inner workings of, let's say, that town or that nation, that can really come into play a lot more. Whereas with his magic, it's like the looser it is. So if it's like Lord of the Rings magic, it can't be able to solve all the small things. There can't always be exact. It has to be kind of like how Gandalf uses magic. It can't solve every problem that happens here and there and is big and abstract. I think there's great reasons to use both. And same with the big to small in world building and your story building. There's benefits going both ways. There's benefits to really figuring out every detail of what you want in, let's say, a town, to this town's going to be very, very loose, which means, I think if you're going to leave things loose in the town, favor the players. If the players kind of come up with an idea or say something, maybe that town has that thing because you didn't say before and you hadn't figured out before, it doesn't.
Yeah, and going back to the session 0 thing, asking your players will give you lots of insight onto that.
Mm-hmm. And
with their backstory.
And with your example, Michael, of that world you created of 3 kind of domains led by 3 different witches, you can even since you started big like that, you can bring that into a session 0 and ask the players, like, do you guys reside within one of these 3 domains? And if that is the case, you can begin focusing on that domain specifically and that witch and fleshing it out further. So you've started with this big scope and then you've zoomed in on a particular area. But I've also been inspired in my games, much in the similar way you thought this like idea of a witch on a broomstick. I found in the last campaign that I ran that Logan was a part of, I found this image of an ancient city in this dark cave with sunlight crashing in through the subterranean roof. And I was like, I'm going to build a campaign world based on this image alone. And so I had an ancient city in a cavern with a giant floating crystal kind of illuminating it as if it were a sun of sorts. And I just built the world based on that single image alone, just because I was so inspired by a subterranean ancient city. But
one day we'll get Adrian in and he'll talk about the similar concept he had for the ridiculous campaign that he had us running in.
I'd heard about his after I'd started this campaign. I was like, well, it wasn't an original idea.
We're going back
Yes.
to Skyrim again.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Oh,
Teni,
that's true.
You never gave me a sword that allowed me to roll over 100 d6s in a turn.
Yeah, that's absurd. Listen, I'm going to put the reins on you there. I'll give you a Staff of the Magi, which is a really powerful weapon, but I ain't going to do some crazy shit like that.
How about letting me have 20 explosive allies in a turn? Each one can blow up for 20 d6 damage.
Adrian
feel
can't
like-
defend himself.
We could get into a whole, I think, topic of like how you personally
Adrian?
run, not even just Adrian, the comparison of like a very silly anything goes campaign to like, you know, a serious, here are rules, they exist. I think that is a whole topic that could be discussed.
Agreed.
With the elusive Adrian.
Yes, indeed. We've talked a lot about world building, and we could probably go even further in depth into this. And unfortunately, we don't have that much time. So maybe there will be another day where we talk more about world building and maybe go into more specifics about the process of that. But I want to bring us into a game because we're going to have some fun while we still have time.
Yay.
Hold on
This
a
is
second.
this is fun? This is supposed to be
I
fun?
didn't sign up for fun.
Oh, well.
I thought D&D was only serious and depressing.
No, that's just your game.
Yeah.
That is just my games.
Well, if you're
But they're
so
so good.
if we're so desperate to play D&D, the game I've got prepped today is kind of a pseudo D&D mini version. This is a new game where we kind of act as DM and player, where we present each other with a situation, and then the other person has to determine what happens based on the prompt they've been given. This game is called Nat 1 Crit 20.
Ba-ba-ba-ba.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll initiative.
Da-da-da-da.
Everybody, go ahead and roll your dice or your apps. Okay.
My app has rolled.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody's got the rolls. I'm just going to get out my little thing to write on. I see Michael's got a 13.
Cute.
I've got a 20. So,
I do.
I got a 17.
okay. I did not want to go first in this, but here we are.
I think it's appropriate. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
I rolled a 1.
So Michael got 13. Anybody higher than that other than Logan?
I
Okay.
beat somebody. I rolled a 2.
This feels like
Oh.
real D&D.
Ow.
That's a Matt roll right there.
You know what?
Yeah, I don't know if it's come
That's
up much in
appropriate.
these talks yet, but I have a really bad luck when it comes to rolling in D&D, and usually my rolls are pretty abysmal.
As a DM, I love Matt rolls. They're great. They make for awesome story moments.
Yep.
So
Oh boy.
to kind of explain the rules a little bit more. So I've written this turn order down. So it's going to be myself, Logan, Michael, Matt, and then Dallis. And what's going to happen is the person higher up in initiative, for example, myself to Logan, I'm going to give him a prompt as if I were the DM. And I'm going to tell him to make a skill check of some kind. Logan then, what he gets to do is decide if he rolled a natural 1 or a critical 20, meaning and normally in the rules there aren't critical successes or fails for ability checks, but because this is a fun game, we're going to say there is. So Logan gets to decide if he rolled a natural 1 or a critical 20, just based on what he thinks will be more interesting. And then he gets to narrate how that situation resolves itself based on whether he crit failed or crit succeeded. And then Logan will become the DM and he'll pass his prompt
So we all have
on to
completely
Michael,
different
who will
prompts.
then do the same thing. Yes. I mean, you guys just, yes. Everybody kind of think up a situation that you're going to give to the next player. But for now, I'm going to start with mine for Logan, which I'm going to make up on the fly. Okay, so Logan, you are a rogue. You've been sent to break into a wizard's tower. You're picking the lock, which thankfully is easy enough for you. You pick the lock. However, as soon as you turn the doorknob, you feel a sense of electricity around the doorknob. and I need you to make an Arcana check. What do you critical succeed or critical fail?
No, I critically fail this.
All right, what happens?
All right. I, the great Arnaldo, has been cursed by this electricity. It rushes through my hands. I can't move my hand. A rogue without my hand. Oh, I must get out of here. I stumble along the ground, falling. The electricity has kind of, messed up my nervous system, and I flop on the ground. Oh, could this be the end for the great Arnaldo?
God damn,
I look down the hallway
Logan.
to see what comes.
How are we supposed to top that? God
Damn, that I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that. So you don't have to role play, though I applaud you, Logan, for having done that. I was kind of more envisioning this as a DM kind of narrating the outcome. But it was
This
great.
could be the fun of letting your player narrate the exacts of what happens to them.
That's fair. And you know what? Logan's his own DM, so I can't make him stick to rules.
I am above the rules.
All right, Logan. Well, you get to pass your prompt on to Michael.
Ooh, all right.
And also, these situations don't have to be connected.
No, so Michael.
Oh, I think it might be kind of.
Well, mine's not because I thought of
or
it
not.
as Danny was thinking of his. Can I switch it around? Oh yeah, Michael, you are a bard. You come in. You are the defense to this vault that Hornaldo has tried to break into. And you see him on the ground. He looks pitiful, but you're a bard. You realize no foe is defeated until you seduce them. Michael,
Oh no.
make a performance check for me.
Oh my!
Ooh. You know what? Just to shake things up, I'm going to. I'm going to nat 20 and get a critical success on this. So what will end up happening is what's this guy's name's going to be? The Great Fishmonger, who plays a ukulele in the shape of a trout. He sees the Great Tornado writhing on the ground. He goes over and he starts to play a sea shanty for him, kneeling down, lifting him up with from his chin, and stares deeply into his eyes while he sings this sea shanty to the Great Tornado, and causing him to. Causing the electricity that he's feeling to start to dissipate, and as if by a healing word, he stands up and says to the Great Fishmonger that the Great Tornado, needs the treasure hidden in this wizard's vault in order to save his darling mother from the horrible curse that has befallen her.
Oh no.
Matt, as the wizard of this tower, you've seen that your guard has fallen prey to this rogue's charms and vice versa. As you're looking through your crystal ball, you watching this unfold in front of you.
All right.
Make a perception check as one of the Great Hornaldo's companions is starting to come down the hallway, seeing this incredible display of affection towards these two unlikely lovers.
All right, I'm gonna do a nat 20 on that one, and I get a good view of what's going on in his crystal ball. As he lets out a heavy sigh, realizing he's hired an idiot to guard his vault. He turns to the other people in the room with him, ordering them to 1, go down there and stop the thieves, and 2, fire the fishmonger. Get him out of this tower. He is not doing his job.
Amazing.
Can I just say, mine originally was going to be that you were going to have to seduce a dragon until you suggested oh, what if they're all connected? I was like, oh, maybe they could be connected.
I'm enjoying this. This is great.
This is
All right,
beautiful.
Matt, what do you have for Dallis?
Okay.
I think I might break the connection train here. Get a
Go
little
for it.
reset as we've got into a very convoluted
Hello.
place. Dallis, you are a peasant. Peasant from your village who's wandered off after their village was destroyed. But this came about as a group of adventurers came through, claiming they'd save you from the giant monsters plaguing the area. But in actuality, just caused a big fight with so much collateral damage, it was probably better if they didn't come at all. While wandering through the woods, hungry and starving, you come across an encampment with 4 goblins. They are arguing over this one rabbit they have. Who will eat it? Who gets it? Now's your chance. You are starving. You need this food. How will you get it from them? I'll give you a choice.
Oh.
Would you like to do a physical encounter or a social encounter?
Ooh, neither of those is really what I was thinking you were going with this.
Ooh.
Let's do a physical encounter.
All right. You've never been much for talking, but you do notice beside you there's a nice, sharp, heavy stick. You might be able to get it from them by force.
You're
How
giving
do
me
you
too many
try?
options here. We're gonna.
Deception, intimidation,
Oh, I
persuasion.
will intimidate them. Yes.
All right. And you can make your roll. You pick up your stick and
Okay. I'm gonna nat 20 this because it's not just the stick I'm picking up. I'm gonna go into the nearby forest and collect all the dirt and leaves and sticks as I can possibly find, and I'll slather myself in mud. And I will attach the sticks to my head to create a crown, and I'll attach leaves to my arms to create wings, and then I will emerge from the forest, the great guardian, Tutankhamun, and I will come flapping my fake leafy wings towards the goblins, and will cry, caw-caw, caw-caw, and I attempt to scare them off, intimidate them away from their one rabbit. And I think that's a nat 20. I think that works very well.
I'd say so.
Nice.
Okay. Do I get to do one for Denny?
Yes,
We
yes,
roll
you do.
back around. Great. Denny, let's start. Yeah, we're starting fresh here too. You're a happy barbarian. You take a seat at a table at the end of a long day. You're in a pub. You just fought some guys out back. You sit down. The barkeep comes over to you and drops a plate of food in front of you. Looks like nothing you've ever seen before. So you ask the guy, what is this? He tells you it's beef. I'm gonna roll a deception check and see, or an intuition check to see if he's telling you the truth.
I'm going to choose to critically fail this. And I'm going to say, and myself, the barbarian, thinks, well, either it is beef or it's not beef, but I've eaten some rough stuff. So I've had a long day. I'm just going to eat whatever the heck it is. This supposed beef. And then I eat it, and it turns out it contains a very lethal dose of poison. And the barbarian falls off his chair, and in that moment, the crew that had been hiding in the back come out, tie me up, and I'm taken away somewhere.
Oh.
Who knows for what purpose? Probably ritual for a dragon. Rough time.
You shouldn't have failed that check.
Well, there we go.
Only the bard had seduced the dragon. Instead, he was busy seducing Hornaldo.
Damn it.
Ronaldo.
Great fishmonger failed me. And he got fired.
Yeah.
Well, that was not one crit 20. That was a fun little exercise.
I enjoyed it.
Oh gosh, rushing towards the end of this episode. Our next segment is our chance to hear from you, the listeners. This is Question Dicely. Now, this one is more of a prompt than it is a question. It was sent by friend from the Yukon. They wanted to stay anonymous. And it says, explore different homebrew rules that you've seen or heard of.
God, I've heard so many. But I really think
Love
you should talk to
homebrew.
Adrian about a lot of these. Some of the
Okay.
more
yeah.
like standard homebrews I've seen is something that both you and Logan did in a recent campaign, going back to Session Zeros. you've introduced the idea of feats for flaws for your characters in a session 0, which a flaw is not a thing that really exists in D&D in the way that you've done them. And so I think it's an interesting kind of addition into the game.
Yeah, because some of the flaws that have come about have been very detrimental.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that you had the full right to choose the fact that you could not lie.
Yep, that was on you.
Yeah. I think in terms of, that's like a very common one that I really like. Another one that I'm using for mine is that instead of doing a feat or an ability score, when you level up, you just get both. Like when you get to those levels where you would get an ability score or a feat, you get both. Which, yes, in the end, it's going to make people really powerful at level 20. Sure. But I do feel there are a lot of, and it's limited. I've limited it to, there's a lot of feats that are like kind of fluffy. Linguist, actor. They don't get chosen like ever. Unless you're me and choose linguist because you want to know every single language. So I was like, these allow those feats that never get chosen because why choose linguist when you can have sentinel and great weapon master a chance to shine. You can take those and still get your 2 ability scores. But it's also allowing, if you want great weapon master, if you want sentinel, if you want one of those big ones, you have to forsake the ability score. So it's just like, gets a little flavor, gets you those ones that never get chosen or that are more, character driven than, combat and mechanics driven, a chance to shine. And I'm excited. We still haven't, I think this level up, the next one is going to be the first one where people get the option. And I'm excited to see what
I split myself too hard.
Yeah, true. Everyone multi-class.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see when people get the option what smaller feats they'll take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've done something similar to the feats for flaws, but the difference for what I did, which depending on how you want to play it, can be better or worse. I did, for the most part, the flaws were pretty silly, but could have real implications in the game, but they were random. So if you wanted to take a feat at the start, you could, but you had to roll on a table and you'd get a random flaw. This was, again, obviously during character creations, they could build it around that. Like, I don't remember a lot of them from that table, but I remember one was fun, was you're a friend of nature, so you didn't like hurting animals. So if you ever went up against a beast at the start of the encounter, you had to roll just like a DC 10 wisdom save. And if you failed it, you wouldn't be able to attack the beasts directly until you decide to pass that check. So you can use your action on your turn to try again, to like will yourself, like, I gotta hurt the animal, I gotta do this. Could become a problem if you ever fought beasts. When you don't fight beasts, it's not a big deal. Every once in a while, I'd throw something in to make that pay off. And this one, another one I really liked that we did a bit, it's not really a homebrew, but it's for crits. Denny had this deck, which was a lot of fun, which has essentially a crit fail and a crit success deck, where instead of using general rules for it, if you ever got a critical hit or a critical failure, you would draw from the top of that deck and use what was appropriate to what you were doing. That one was fun because it was really random what would happen, as opposed to like a critical success is always double damage or something like that. It could be like you critically hit with bludgeoning damage, you do your normal damage, and they're knocked back 20 feet. Like, just kind of made it a little weirder what you did, which I always found fun. But, yeah.
Oh, speaking of the crit homebrew thing, one of the homebrew rules that Logan had in our last campaign was critical hits were max damage for one set of dice, and then you roll whatever for your second set of dice. And then it goes about the normal rest of the like crit stuff. Like, so instead of just rolling 2 sets of dice, you take the top number, say like it was a mall. You have you have 12, and then you roll your 2d6s on top of that.
Yeah, I like that roll too.
Yeah, that was what I was going to talk about, because normally when you roll a damage, let's say short sword, it's just 1d6. If you get a crit, it instead doubles to 2d6. But this can result in you rolling like 2 1s, which doesn't feel critical at all. So we forgo rolling one of those doubled dice, instead saying one of them rolled maximum, and then just roll the other one so it's maximum plus a little bit more, which I think is a lot more satisfying when you crit.
Yeah, you always get to do a lot of damage.
Like, I've definitely have campaigns. I've always had ones where it's like, ooh, normal rules. Like, one of our friends is running one that, you know, Matt, Dallis, Michael, and myself are in. And I've definitely had crits that have just rolled terribly. And it's like, that was less than my normal, like, that's less than the average I would get on a normal hit. And it's like, I get it, like, crits could be all over the board, but I think there is something really fun in giving those, like, a crit is amazing. And a crit fail is terrible. You'll lose a turn. That's a lot in the grand scheme of things. Losing that action.
That same kind of thing is why I liked using those random cards, because it always meant that your critical hit did something fun, something cool, something like extraordinary, but it came with the risk that your critical failure could be really detrimental as opposed to just missing your turn. It could be you broke your sword, you injured yourself in some way, you lost a spell slot, like something misfired, who knows. But it was a high risk, high reward kind of thing, which I thought was always really fun.
Yeah, I've heard like very valid arguments for why not to do it on a crit fumble, like on a 1. But I would say one thing I've also done with crits, we did it when I ran Curse of Strahd, and I think when I ran Eberron, was they rolled another d20, and then I had a chart of the thing their crit did, similar to the dice, which if you rolled 2 20s, sometimes it would be like, you just decapitated this monster. It did mean there is a chance fighting Strahd that you just
that'd be
one-shot.
so fun, though.
But it also meant there was a chance that Strahd could just one-shot
Not
you.
as fun.
I didn't allow it for things like a goblin or a random zombie, because the players will fight a lot of those. And I think always with homebrew, you have to figure out that balance. Players can do something monsters can't too, but you have an infinite amount of monsters. So maybe giving them something that can get that double 20 decapitation, don't give it to the fodder monsters. Just give it to big bosses, important fights. And maybe even giving players a way to prevent something like that. So that way it's like, it's not just, oh, Michael's out of the fight right from the start because of one crit.
Yeah. That would happen to me too.
I was going to say, that's a great person to choose in that example.
Michael, unless you wanted it to happen. That's what we just talked about.
As we also mentioned, I always roll low, so I'd never crit. So
And I think to top this all off,
Matt has terrible rolls. Michael has terrible luck.
To top this all off, I think another one that tends to get applied to a lot of games is drinking potions as a bonus action. It's like, with the amount of health like healing potions, for example, give you, why would you want to spend an action to drink a potion that'll just as easily, those hit points will easily go away on the next turn? Like, it's just so shitty. So making a bonus action so you can still also attack, that feels a lot nicer as a player.
It's not something I do as a DM, but I totally get that. I would say, like, I feel like we could have a whole talk about 5th edition and
Actually,
do support classes really exist? No.
Another home rule along the healing line is I've seen it where people can use, or we've played where people can use their hit dice to heal outside of rests. But again, they only get them back or half back at a long rest. So, like, if you want to, you could spend your action to spend hit dice to heal yourself, to give everyone kind of a bit of a healing ability. But I've seen that played usually when there isn't a healer in the group. But yeah, it also makes it so your rests are less important. Like short rests for a lot of people could mean nothing if they've used their heal or hit dice throughout the game. So,
unless you're
well,
warlock.
and Logan's doing the opposite of that in the current campaign, where you can only use hit dice to heal. You don't heal on a long rest at all. You have to use your hit dice, which is rude. and I'm going to die.
Like,
I know where
so,
I'm sitting right now in our campaign.
I think it is definitely meant to be like, this puts real risk on things. It also, the reason I did something like this was, one, I'm using a variant rule, which are rules in some of the supplement books that allow you to do things that the base rules, if you just looked at the player's handbook, don't include. And a lot are around downtime activities. And actually, my healing rules aren't even, like, I didn't come up with them. They are a variant rule in those books.
Huh.
Yep, they're in the Dungeon Master's Guide in Xanathar's. And the reason was I wanted to be like, oh, you can't spend every second of every day adventuring. You will burn out.
Right.
But that means that those tool proficiencies you had, whether it be, artisan tools, brewing tools, allow you to do something on that day you have to take off. With the idea that hopefully then players would also, those downtimes are times to spend with each other, which give great roleplay opportunities. As like someone whose background comes from older editions, a thing that doesn't really exist anymore is players teaching players skills. And it used to be like, oh, your adventuring day, that even the short rest, you teach each other the languages And then once you're level like 15, 20 and stuff, cool, you've all learned things from each other. And so I was like, oh, this gives like forced downtime and doesn't allow the exploitation of, oh, we're just going to take a long rest every time things go bad. Because the long rest really in mine is a short rest plus your abilities that refresh. It's like a slightly better short rest. So it's like, okay, we can't just fight the boss, take a long rest. Fight the next thing, take a long rest. It's like, okay, there's even your long rest isn't going to, either you're taking time off or it's weighing risk and reward, and we'll see how it plays out. We just started my campaign.
I also like that I also like that idea because it forces your players to think things through in a way that's more than just combat. It's like, we have this thing we got to solve. We might not just want to run in and fight it because we're pretty injured right now. And this could kill all of us. Or like, I know a lot of the time, especially when you get to higher levels, a lot of time traps in dungeons really don't do a lot because you can just be like, all right, who's the big guy? Walk in, trigger it. You'll heal up after. Like, health is a lot more important in that sense. You'd probably want to figure out how to disarm the trap as opposed to just triggering it and trying to shrug it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty more homebrew rules that we could discuss. And in fact, I imagine at some point we should probably have an episode solely dedicated to that topic, because homebrew is so cool. And especially if you've played like a system for so long, it's like, well, then it kind of becomes stale. What can we do to spice it up? Homebrew is an excellent way to make a game system feel fresh again.
I would love to talk more about homebrew sometime in the future, because I do a lot of it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I've been trying to explore that a bit more myself. But otherwise, if you, the listeners, want to submit a question to Question Dicely, send an email with your question to dicelychannel@gmail.com. Include the letters QD at the start of your subject if you want your question to be read on the podcast. Also, let me know if you'd like to be shouted out, and if you have a social media handle that you'd like me to shout out as well. Otherwise, I'd like to thank my guests for joining us on the Speak Dicely podcast. So I'm going to plug your guys' social medias here really quick. You can follow Dallis on Dallis the VA, as in voice actor, Dallis spelled Dallis, on Instagram and Twitter. And also she has a YouTube channel, Dallis Mackenzie, which is listed amongst the Dicely friends on the YouTube channel. Logan, you can find at LCKraken. You are. In fact, all of you that have YouTube channels are amongst the Dice friends. Logan, you can find as LCKraken on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Are you on Instagram as well, Logan?
I am on Instagram.
Same handle?
Yep. Mostly miniature photos.
Excellent. And then you can also follow Matt and Niki on Level Up on YouTube as well, also listed amongst the Dice friends. And Michael is on Instagram as MichaelPishy4, and also on Twitter as Pishy4. Is there anything you guys wanted to elaborate on with your social medias or anything I missed?
Nope.
Perfect.
Nope.
Michael's a normal person that doesn't really do a whole lot of influencer and or creating things, but hey, maybe one day I will.
Well, wouldn't it be funny if all of a sudden you had a bunch of followers and then felt like you needed to do something?
Peer
I was like,
pressure.
oh, man.
Peer pressure.
Hey,
Oh,
Michael,
man.
today's the day to start. I just started stuff for my YouTube things. You could do it too. One of us.
I could.
One of us.
And maybe. Who knows?
And I'm sorry to the listeners for this being
Maybe this will get us started.
for being a bit of a shorter episode, but we'll continue this conversation on the next episode, which next week is Christmas. So
Wow.
happy holidays to everybody. I know, right? It's coming up so quick.
Yeah, it's so quick.
Happy future Christmas.
Oh, God.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in to Speak Dicely. My name is Teni Brant, and I hope to speak Dicely with you again soon. Happy holidays, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
The Speak Dicely podcast is produced by Teni Brant. The intro and outro music were created by Teni Brant. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to the Dicely D&D YouTube channel. There you can watch our previous episodes of the Speak Dicely podcast, as well as watch our introductory series on how to play Dungeons & Dragons. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and Facebook at DicelyDND. We'll see you next time on the Speak Dicely podcast.